there were people working to end slavery, people working to eradicate slavery. There were also people increasing the exaggerated portrayals that we find in the minstrel material.
Minstrel caricatures mirrored the prevailing belief that slavery was good for the slave, since it drew upon his natural inferiority and willingness to serve. Slaves were content. The proof was offered in the image of the happy Sambo.
The old plantation was presented as a kind of paradise. White Americans were being constantly bombarded with the image of happy slaves, is what it amounted to. So slavery must be a good institution if the slaves were happy and the masters were kindly. And so that whole cultural image of a benign or beneficent institution was projected constantly in the period immediately before the Civil War.
So blessed with moderate work, with ample fare, with all the good the starving pauper needs, the happier slave on each plantation leads.
I am quite sure they never could become a happier people than I find them here. No tribe of people have ever passed from barbarism to civilization whose progress has been more secure from harm, more genial to their character, or better adapted to their intellectual feebleness than the Negroes.
Oh, hand the banjo down to play.
We'll make it ring both night and day.
If we care not what the white folks say, they can't get us to run away.
Time and again, these sentiments were expressed in the popular songs and novels before the Civil War. For many Americans, North and South, the myth of Sambo resolved both the moral and political conflict of allowing slavery in a free society.
On the one hand, whites like to think of their blacks as Sambos in the antebellum period, but they could never have operated plantations with Sambos, and they knew that.
The slavery debate grew more heated as the Civil War approached. Minstrels, playing to conservative sentiment, turned their attention to free blacks in the North, and a new character appeared beside the Southern Sambo, Zip Coon.
Transcendentalism is that spiritual cognizance of the psychological irreversibility.
A dandy and a buffoon, Zip Coon's attempts to imitate whites mocked the notion of racial equality. Together, Zip Coon and Sambo provided a double-edged defense of slavery. Zip Coon, proof of blacks' ludicrous failure to adapt to freedom, and Sambo, the fantasy of happy darkies in their proper place.
I got to take down the judge's clothes, got to take 'em in the house, yes, Lord, got to get out that old ironing board, fix 'em up for the judge to wear.
When this film was released in 1934, the black mammy had become such a staple figure in portraits of the Old South, it was hard to imagine a Southern home without her.
Praise the Lord, Mr. Loom. Is you here? Is you in? Hi, Aunt Delphi. How come you here?
Like the happy Sambo, the mammy emerged as a defense of slavery. Plantation novels and minstrel shows presented her as fat, pitch black, and happily obedient to her master and mistress.
You stay here. Us is going to kill the high-fatness rooster in the yard and a great big bowl of milk gravy and grits and waffles. Don't you worry now, honey. You's home now. Miss Jones home. Miss Jones home.
She was always presented as docile, loyal, protective of the White House and the big house, an indication that she understood the value of this society. She's presented almost as an antithesis of the white lady, the person who does not have the qualities of fragility and beauty which would make her valued in the society.
With her hair hidden beneath a bandana, her ample weight, dark skin, and coarse manners, the mammy was stripped of sexual allure. Faithfully, she served the master's household in popular fiction and theater, but here her presence never evoked sexual tension.
If the mammy were to be a sexual being, which of course in reality she was, but if she were to be that in myth and in fiction and so on, she would become a threat to the mistress of the house. She would become a threat to the entire system. Because she would then be capable of being desired by the master of the house. We know from reading the diaries and the letters of slave mistresses that this is very often the case, and created much disruption, much friction in this supposedly happy plantation system that the planners wanted to project.
A brand new red bandana around Mammy's head. You couldn't miss the color, call it Julie and red. Come on and shake your feet, go on and shake your feet. Shake the Mammy in here, just see that sweet.
While happy in her subservience to whites, the Mammy was portrayed quite differently in relations with her own family.
In your usual setup in American society, the person who controls is the male. The mammy is presented as the controller, a way of indicating, quote unquote, how inferior we are. That men are weak and women are strong. The very opposite of the way it's supposed to be, according to the societal norms. So the mammy strikes at two important concepts of gender in antebellum society. She is strong, asexual, and ugly, when a woman is supposed to be beautiful, fragile, dependent. She is a controller of her own people, of the males in her own society, when the female should be dependent and subordinate. An indication clearly that black people can't make it.
Freedom brought hope to black Americans. Millions of emancipated slaves were inspired by the promise of equality. But this promise was betrayed.
Those who wanted to reestablish firm white control, who wanted to maintain white supremacy by any means possible, used the argument that what had happened was that blacks, no longer under the benign or beneficent or kindly guidance of whites, were reverting to savagery.
Political debate manipulated public fears about the so-called black menace. Old stereotypes were adopted to the new politics. Increasingly, blacks were identified as brutes.
The states and people that favor this equality and amalgamation of the white and black races, God will exterminate. A man cannot commit so great an offense against his race, against his country, against his God, as to give his daughter in marriage to a Negro, a beast.
This climate of racial hysteria was seen in every aspect of popular culture.
The best example of this was in the writings of Thomas Dixon, in his novel The Klansman, which then later became a hit Broadway play, and was finally adapted as the most successful of early American motion pictures, The Birth of a Nation.
Described by President Woodrow Wilson as history writ in lightning, Birth of a Nation captured on film the classic caricature of blacks following Reconstruction. Here, emancipation was viewed as a tragic mistake. It had ended slavery and let loose blacks' wildest passion.